Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the VMblog Expert Interview Series. And today I'd like to welcome back to the show my friend Rob Hirschfeld, the CEO and co-founder of RackN. Rob, it's great to have you back.
David, it is exciting to follow up. I feel like we just scratched the surface and looking forward to going deeper.
Yeah, last time we spoke, we dug into some of the problems and challenges with things like the VMware migration, lifecycle management, and we
Yeah.
spoke a little bit about bare metal too. So this time I'd like to focus on some of the proof points and kind of what needs to happen next, if that's cool.
I love that. I think, we heard back from that video also, and people were really excited about what we were saying. And, I think, what we're going to talk about is really important, not just for why you need to do this, but give people confidence they can succeed in doing these migrations because we see it in the field. You can succeed. It's not hopeless.
Well, let's dig in then. So you've talked about the gap between provisioning only tools and true
Yeah.
lifecycle management. Can you give us a concrete before and after? What does a team's operational reality look like before digital rebar, and what changes first once they ultimately deploy it?
It's a really important question because I think that, you know, everybody has had, if you're running your own infrastructure, there's things that you have to do anyway. And frankly, what we find is there's a lot of things that people should do but don't even think about doing or don't worry about doing. And so when they look at their current processes, what they do is they see the tools they're using to do those processes. And a lot of cases, they can't focus a little bit in on the processes that they're using those tools for. And so the thing that I would have people think about is, yeah, you're probably using an open source provisioning tool. You might be using a lot of Ansible to try and crank all these pieces together. You might, have bits and pieces and some scripts and components. Those are all the tools, exactly like what you're asking. And we do see people with a lot of those tools that they have bent and shaped into a custom process for themselves. It's the process that you actually need to step back and think about. And frankly, our most successful customers aren't the ones who say, I want to replace MAS in the field. I want a better MAS. What they do is they step back and say, here's the process we're using. I want a better process to deliver this end-to-end infrastructure. And, most people recognize that their process isn't great, but they still sort of hug their processes because they're used to them. They do better, frankly, if they say, I'm going to replace the tool, instead of trying to replace the tools, if they are open to replacing the process pieces. And I think that's fundamentally where it goes. But to answer your question directly, if you're an IT leader who's hands off from this, you're going to hear your teams talking about MAS and Foreman or hopefully not Cobbler, that's pretty old now, or using the OEM tools to do these jobs. And when you start hearing terms like that, the thing that you're not hearing is how all of those things are connected. And people miss that you have to do BIOS and RAID updates. You have to have network discovery and you have to have diagnostics in that process. There's all these components to get your systems up and running that require you to stitch all those pieces together. And if you're not thinking that way, then you're actually missing the piece. And the interesting thing to me is I have the same reaction actually on the other side of the extreme where people talk about hyper-converged infrastructure, right? We're starting sort of on this bag of tools piece, but you have the same problem on the hyper-converged infrastructure where it's all of these pieces you're buying like a Nutanix and the hardware is everything's rigidly set in this little vertical pile. And in those cases, you're also incredibly process locked, but you've adopted a vendor's process start to finish, and that's incredibly rigid and you can't adapt or change it. So on the other extreme, you have two extremes on either side, but the unifying piece is understanding your process.
And I'm kind of based on that. I'm kind of curious.
Yeah.
What's the specific failure mode that you see most often in sort of these real
Yeah.
world things? Is it firmware drift, re-imaging cycles, or something else?
It's something incredibly mundane. It's the normal pace of change of systems. So the thing that gets people really caught up is when an operating system changes in its normal life cycle, or hardware changes in its normal life cycle, or you have to change hardware vendors because the machine you want isn't available, right? Those are the components that actually make the biggest failure points in these systems. And the reason why I bring that up and it's so important is because you don't actually have a lot of say in when that happens, right? People want to think they're going to be, they can own this process and, it's their process. It's, it's special. But the reality is your process is not going to break on your schedule. It's going to break on the vendors that you're using schedule and on the internet schedule.
Now, Rob, one of the objections we hear pretty often from infrastructure leaders is, hey, we already have Ansible, Terraform, and a solid
Yeah.
team. Why can't we just build this ourselves? How do you respond to that sort of DIY question?
Oh my goodness, we get that question in every account. Even if it's not our champion, it's other people in the organization want to make that happen. And one of the things that we talk about, to explain this to our customers, and the terminology is sort of basic, but we talk about this as a layer zero, a layer one, and a layer two problem. What you might call the hardware team and the platform team. And there's often an ops team, which is the layer one team that we deal with in the mix of that. Ansible and Terraform are layer two platform team things. They are designed for people who already have operating systems and have cloud infrastructure or virtualized infrastructure. And they aren't really process controlled systems. So one of the challenges with those products and a lot of operations products is that they're designed as a minimal tool, but we're back to tools, with things that you do custom on top of that. Unlike a software product where you get a module, or there's modules in all these tools, but ultimately you're writing custom code over and over and over again with those platforms. And for a platform team, that sort of works because it's icing on the top of the cake. And you're just like, hey, I just need to finish, I've already given you a machine. I just need to do a couple of things to finish provisioning it, right? Or I have an API. I just need to call the API in a repeatable way. That's Ansible and Terraform. That's great. Those products are not really platforms. They don't handle a pipeline that goes end to end. They don't put all of those pieces together, and they certainly don't know how to deal with something like bare metal that you actually have to mold and shape. You have to deal with like, oh wait, it's got 10 NICs in it, but only four of them are active and two of them are on this network and three of them are on that network. And you have to deal with what you find. You have to deal with in-band and out-of-band communication. You have to deal with the fact that there's a lot of heterogeneity in the system, right? So if you're dealing with, even if you're one vendor, there's a lot of drift between models of Dell servers or HP servers. There's tons of drift in Supermicro, right? That variation in your environment is something that those tools specifically are actually not designed to handle very well. And so when somebody asks us about that, what we have to come back to and say is, look, your platform team should use those tools. They're fantastic tools for that team. But what you shouldn't try to do is take those hammers and then apply it down into the bare metal where you need a whole different set of tooling and the problem space is more complex. And what we found is, and the reason I started with this layer zero, layer one, layer two description is that if you can step back and say, let the platform team be the platform team and create a nice boundary where the team doing bare metal, right, using platform like Digital Rebar can deliver working infrastructure, that all of a sudden your Ansible and even Terraform is supercharged. It becomes the incredibly powerful tools they're used to using. But the mistake people make is they assume that because they have those tools, they can apply them into bare metal where it doesn't fit. And what we've seen is teams just get really sidetracked trying to bang those tools in to, make the systems work at the bare metal side, and they end up with something incredibly complex, very fragile, takes them months and months to do it, and then there's one hiccup from a vendor, and then the whole thing comes tumbling down. And the challenge is you get into a state of mind where you get so nervous about that eventual house of cards falling apart that you try and lock your infrastructure, which is the exact opposite of what you need to do. And you're like, all right, well, it's going to break, so I don't want to touch it. And we hit this all the time with organizations, and it's actually a good pressure point for IT leaders. I love giving leaders who are listening to this video these types of pressure points. If your team is afraid to touch something in your IT infrastructure that because it's going to break, if it's a high risk thing, that is a warning flag that there's something you need to take out and change. It's not a don't touch this, right? It's, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to leave that live wire laying on the ground. I need to fix it and put, and make it safe. And that's, I think, part of what people should look at when they see that. You want your all of your infrastructure to be resilient, change adaptable, ready to go, easy to patch, something you can get help with and call somebody when you need extra expertise. And so the tools we started this question with lend themselves to all do it yourselfing, and then they fail as soon as you start testing any of the things I was mentioning.
Great points. Great points. Now, teams that started their VMware migration 12 to 18
Mhm.
months ago are now hitting the phase where the second stack needs to be production ready. What is it
Yeah.
that you guys are seeing go wrong in that transition? And what does a real migration runway actually need to look like?
Oh my goodness. You know, I was setting it up a little bit, I think, with this idea of these platform teams trying to make this work. What we see happening over and over again, and sadly, this is true even in the VMware teams that are trying to just migrate to the new version of VMware, because VMware also has this problem because the Broadcom acquisition Broadcom's forcing people to move to the latest versions of VMware, and because of the licensing changes, you should be replatforming to higher CPU count machines to get the most out of your licenses. So it's VMware teams need to replatform and have this consideration, and they don't get the vendor assistance from the OEMs anymore, just like the OpenShift virtualization people or Proxmox or any of the other virtualization technologies out there. What we find is the challenge is that the platform teams are often tasked with these migrations. And just like they say, all right, I'm the platform team, I should know how to run VMware or run OpenShift or run Kubernetes, right? That knowledge does not translate into the infrastructure layer below. And so what we see over and over again is companies that have started projects. A lot we see because we do large enterprise, a lot of OpenShift virtualization projects. Those projects are stuck. The platform teams get a couple of servers and then they try to automate them. It takes them months and months because they don't have the tools, they don't have the expertise. And then they show up the demo and they can't create a repeatable cluster set. And they can't just bang, they just can't force it to happen. This isn't a work harder answer. You have to actually understand how these pieces go. What we've seen work is actually pulling the emergency brake on those projects. And we had a story with a large retail chain where they've been working for almost a year trying to get their OpenShift virtualization project going, and the executives literally just said, "You're out of time." Right. And we were on site already, and we said, "Look, we can already do this work." And even with provable demos and being able to show that we could do it, we still encountered resistance because that team didn't want to give up control, which is really, unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, that's how it's seen. It's seen as, giving up control between the layers, which is not actually what happened. What we ended up doing is we said, look, if you get the bare metal pieces going, Digital Rebar already included all of the automation to build the platform, get all the bare metal ready state and conditioned. And we'd already done the OpenShift work to install OpenShift and get it ready to be automated by the OpenShift team. Right? We showed up with all that working. Now, it wasn't done in that the team still wanted to add in GitOps workflows. We worked with Red Hat because they wanted some changes to how the processes were working. They were able to make changes in the platform teamwork, and we were able to accommodate the changes on the bare metal layer. But that was 2 weeks. So we went from hey, it doesn't work at all, to deploying in production and repeating it across multiple sites and zones. And it wasn't just one install, it was a hub install with spoke installs, right? Because once you get the basics running, once you have that bare metal platform delivering infrastructure that's ready to go and API controlled, then the platform team wakes up and says, wait a second, I can just ask for a machine with these parameters in it, and I'll get back that machine with those parameters. And you're like, yes, that's exactly what happens. And that's cloud-like. And once they get that experience, the platform team knows exactly what to do, and it just completely transforms. So that project went from struggling because the platform team was never getting infrastructure in a state that let them accelerate into moving forward at a rocket speed because now all of the barriers that they'd hit were solved for them. What's funny is we actually can do more because we have a lot of intelligence now the platform goes than you would get out of a virtualization platform or a cloud platform. So they're actually getting machines that are more prepared than they would get if they were just doing virtualization. And so there's some horse trading that goes on as they're saying, well, wait a second, we do that in VMs normally, but if you can do that when you deliver the machine, then we can move even faster. And that is where it becomes incredibly powerful. So, you were asking, what does executives think about for this? If you've been struggling to get these projects going and you keep turning to your platform team to do it, stop asking them to do something they don't know how to do, right? We can empower them to have the platform and then do what they're supposed to do. They're not giving up control. They're actually increasing the amount of control and value they're adding into the platform by solving the bare metal problem. And it takes just weeks to get these systems up and running. And then from there, it's not a custom solution. It's a stable, repeatable platform that they're building on top of. And so what's fun for us is now as we're replicating this across multiple customers, every time we make improvements it funnels back to all the other customers. And so our OpenShift virtualization story gets stronger and stronger every week, just like our virtualization and VMware stories get stronger and stronger every week. So, it's a total mindset shift and it's just so much faster. People are thinking that, we can get them a 10% or a 20% improvement in making this stuff go. And it's transformative in what the delivery looks like.
So important, the whole control issue. So finally, as we kind of wrap things up for an
Yeah.
infrastructure leader who's, watching this and already convinced the problem is real, what's the single most valuable thing that they can do in the next, say, 30 days to move the needle? And how does a
Yeah.
conversation with RackN fit into that?
Boy, I feel like I've helped lay those pieces out so far in these other questions. They've been really good and helpful. But I do want to step back. One of the things that as an infrastructure leader you might be missing or your team might be telling you is that the problems that we've been talking about solving this bare metal layer problems either aren't solvable or they're not important. And and so what I would really encourage you is don't just tell people to try harder. Don't just put more pressure on them to get things done. What you need to do as a leader is you need to be able to stop and say, you know what, look, we need to fix, from the bottom up instead of pushing from the top down. And this is what a lot of IT leaders have been very focused on. And we hear this over and over. I need to get VMware out by, and they'll pick a date, July 1st. Gotta get it. That's my drop dead date. And then it keeps moving to the right, and then they renew and they still have VMware. What you need to do is instead of trying to force your teams to move for faster and push from the top down on that, you need to stop and look at a bottoms up solution. You need to understand that when you're fixing the problems at the platform layer, if you don't really have the infrastructure repeatable and API driven and process oriented, and for your CFO hopes multi-vendor, right? If you can't deal with those problems, then you actually are asking a team to try and succeed where they don't have enough knowledge and control. And so you have to be able to tell that team, I know we're behind schedule, but I'm not going to catch up by telling you to work harder. I'm gonna have you catch up by stopping you, figuring out what's actually not working in your process. And I pretty much guarantee you this bare metal automation layer because I've watched a lot of teams struggling with this, and the common denominator is they just don't have that standardized platform. And look at what it would take to get that to work. And then allow your team, right, bring in the bare metal expertise or tell the platform team to get the assistance they need. Bring in that expertise, do that work and go. Even in this retailer I was talking to you about, we got them about 50% of the way there, and they started getting machines that worked, and the platform team was coming in and saying, "Ah, you got machines finally." And they were taking them. And we actually had to go back to the executives and say, wait, give us an extra week to get the integrations, finished, and then you'll get full clusters, not just machines. So as an executive, you have to step back and think, I need to make sure that my team has a repeatable bare metal automation process, right? And it should be multi-vendor. It should be platform agnostic because you don't want to just build another HCI VMware tool for a new platform. It should be a actual real platform with an SLA and APIs and a service mentality. Once you have that, then what you're going to build on top of that is going to rocket forward. And there's a funny secret with this. What we found is that the companies who do that, it's not just an OpenShift benefit. They get that benefit for AI platforms. They're going to get that benefit for VMware platforms. You can actually make your VMware products much more effective, faster, and you can save a lot of money in VMware by having a bare metal layer that then lets you switch vendors, then lets you, control the cluster life cycles better. All of those capabilities are unlocked once you have that layer. We've seen it over and over again in our customers. They save, oh my God, some of them do cut their hardware spend in half just by being able to leverage multiple vendors or pick the right vendor for the right workload instead of standardizing, by breaking the VxRail tax or that integration tax. For OpenShift virtualization, it allows you to really treat that as a full-blown infrastructure cluster and manager. I can't, we have a ton of case studies that tell these stories too, of course. But the savings are really real if you can break that process barrier and adopt proven working processes that are vendor neutral, and then build your stuff on top of it because your team knows how to do that part. That I know.
Wow, that's some great information there. Rob, thank you again for coming on the show and sharing all of this with the VMblog audience. And normally I don't say check out the case studies, but in this case,
Yeah.
uh, from some of the cost savings and the additional benefits that you get with this bare metal, I do highly recommend people check out the case studies on your site.
We would love to have that, and our team loves to tell these stories. They love to help explain how these systems work and what these processes work. It's the passion of what the RackN team does, is create these repeatable processes. We want to see our customers win in how they run infrastructure, and so they love to tell these stories too, and they can help shape the narrative for the people watching the video.
Great. Well, thanks again, Rob. As always, it's great to catch up with you.
It's a pleasure, David. Thank you.
All right.